Okay, so I have a first statement, and Stephan, you actually set it up because you said, why do we need architects? Or you said, we don't need architects.
Yeah.
So a statement is, we are agile, we don't need architects.
That would be nice, wouldn't it? No, I'm not. I'm just kidding. Now, I think I would like to refer to what you said in your talk. Like, it depends on the maturity of a team. If you have a lot of senior developers who have great experience and know their like architecture principles, then why would you need someone else making decisions for them? Because that goes in directly into the principles on having a self-organizing team, making their own decision, taking responsible for their own professional judgment and decisions they do. So in that case, yeah, Eltjo.
So there has been some research done by Jan Bos, who's working currently at Chalmers University, I think, in Göteborg, and they have looked at a number of software companies in the southern Sweden area, and they have researched the effects of doing agile development. And they I have to look at his presentation, so because I haven't learned it by heart yet, but it's actually quite interesting. They looked at the activities that were needed to do a successful project, a software development project, and they looked at the activities that tended to be omitted in agile projects. And let me see. So, and there were four basically that they identified. One of them was risk management, which is funny because risk management gets quite a bit of attention in the agile methodologies. But the self-organizing teams tended to focus on the risks that were in their particular thing that they were doing in their particular sprint, but they tended to sort of overlook the risks that affected their context outside of their component that they were working on. And then also something that you mentioned, another activity that was not really, or that was sometimes overlooked, were architectural decisions and changes. And this was, actually you said this yourself, right? That there are some architectural decisions that you have to, or architectural concerns, that actually you have to, as a team, you have to consider when you're building a piece of software, even if you're an agile team. So I think we all agree that we need architecture. The question here is, do we need an architect?
Exactly.
And and there's two other things that tend to be omitted. One is providing architectural knowledge. So this is just the coaching, the knowledge, right?
Exactly.
And the fourth one was monitoring the current status of the system, which I think is very much attached to the risk thing. So I guess my answer is a little bit the same as yours, except that I don't think that if these things are omitted, it means that the team is not mature enough to live without an architect. I think this is a natural tendency. If you abide by the Agile manifesto, then you tend to create an organization that puts less value on these things than on some of the other things that I mentioned there. And so yes, it will probably be handy, especially if you have a team working in a larger context. You need somebody to oversee that larger context and to take care of the risk management and the architectural decisions and to sort of act as a conscience. And I don't think, actually there used to be a principle in our approach that says the architect as decision maker. And I no longer believe that because other research has shown that 80% of architectural decisions are made by groups of people, not by one person. So this is why we changed this to actually the architect as the decision owner and somebody who actually sort of coaches or shepherds the agile team or maybe the bigger team or the higher hierarchical level team to make these decisions and to make sure that they are executed.
Simon, do you agree? Because
no.
your face changed.
Yeah. No, I was kind of mulling through a bunch of things while you were talking, and I'm wondering if we need to step back a number of loops here. And I'm going to come back to a question about how do you deal with external change, messing up and affecting your architecture. And you do need to get your book out and to figure out, well, what strategies do I have to make sure that that change doesn't impact into my system? does a team catch that? Right, so if that's a common situation, does every team catch that potential scenario? And the answer is no. Why not? A couple of reasons. Immature industry. The people making the decisions perhaps don't have the right experience, is a potential answer. And maybe it comes back to this engineering thing. So there was a really good talk at Saturn this year, the Saturn conference in the US, by Mary Shaw from the SEI. And the whole talk was basically about, is software development an engineering discipline? And Mary compared it to the building world, and the answer is categorically no, not yet. But if you look at what the building industry does, they do have that body of knowledge. So in order to become a building architect, you have to go read those books. I think we need to get to the same thing. I think we need to get to a point where we have a single body of knowledge that says, if you are building systems like this, here's a bunch of things you should do. If you're building systems like this, likewise. I think it all comes down to knowledge and the whole engineering thing. So at the moment, it's very much an ad hoc thing. Some teams work better than others. Why? Because they have better people. Like, end of story.
True.
Yeah, I think it's true.
So why again did you not agree, and with whom? Never mind.
I've forgotten one.
Difficult one.
Does somebody from the audience have something to add? There were a couple of people that said they were an architect, right?
Not anymore.
They all changed.
Or they've left.
Okay, interesting. So, I think we can go to another statement. We wrote down something like, do we need an agile architecture, or do we need agile architecturing?
Yes.
Both.
Yeah.
Is there any difference between the two? You
Yes.
have to make a choice.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate?
So that's the two things I spoke about. So creating an agile architecture is creating an architecture that allows you to change quickly, and you can do that in a lightweight way.
Somebody else has any comments?
Yeah.
And there's a tension between those.
Yeah.
The more lightweight you make the architecting process, the more probably the less agile your architecture becomes. And you made that very clear in your slides. I think there's a fundamental difference between the two. It's the quality attribute of agility tends not to be automatically produced by an agile team.
Well, what you see a lot of in organizations is that this makes sense to all of us while we're talking about it here, but you have all these processes and responsibilities people get, and they get that in their annual review as well, as in, did you perform like to these and these standards? And that triggers some behavior which people tend to behave differently than they naturally think they should. So what you see then is that this, I've seen organizations where, for example, managers have KPIs like, well, no changes are allowed. But they also have a KPI, yeah, you need to be more agile and you need to be more responsive to change. And such behaviors you see a lot of the time, and yeah, it makes sense that you need to create an architecture that allows you to be more responsive to changes in your environment. But if you have a organizational culture or a governance in that sense that moves you away from that, that's where the real trouble starts.
So I think a very simple example is the hardware abstraction layer. So you have a team and you're starting to build a racing game, right? And you're building it for, I don't know, Xbox 360, is that the latest thing? And then somebody comes to you and says, well, you know, are we later going to release this on PlayStation? And you say, well, okay, we may. And then the question becomes, are we going to use a hardware abstraction layer? And now the default agile answer is Yagni. You ain't gonna need it. So that means basically anticipate as little as possible. But by exactly not anticipating, by not building it in because of Yagni, you are creating you are basically increasing your time to market. If the game becomes a success, you're increasing your time to market to port it to the next platform. So that's the tension between agile working and agile architecture.
It's just a foolish blinkered outlook on life, isn't it? So you're not going to need it.
It may be, but if the chances of the game having to be ported are maybe only 10%, and the cost of actually adding that hardware abstraction layer later is small, then it may be a good decision to actually take on some technical debt. But you know, I think it should be an economic. It should not be a judgment based on a dogma like Yagni or, you know, let's build the architecture as agile as possible. I think it should be an economic consideration, and you should actually think about these scenarios. What is actually the probability that we're going to need to port it? And what are actually the costs that we are going to save by doing it upfront? And I think the other misunderstanding is that architecture is an upfront design discipline. It's not. And those architects that actually do that, you know, think that they are finished once they have delivered the architecture and then go on to the next project. I don't think they can be very good because they don't learn from their mistakes.
Right.
There was somebody in the audience that totally disagrees.
Totally disagree.
So before you speak, I'm going to stand here because I'm in the camera.
I think I quite disagree with you on that one. Take for example the game. If you're just going to build a game on top of a hardware abstraction layer and you're going to release them on multiple platforms, it will be either it will be a pixel-based adventure game, which is nice, or it will run really crappy on every piece of hardware you can get your hands on because they actually work all differently. So if you want to do that, let's say PlayStation and the Xbox, either you say at the start, we want to release for both platforms, in which case you actually build a whole, and then you have two developers, one going after the Xbox and the other going after the PlayStation, and you're continuously delivering value on both systems. Or you're not going to do it at all, because it doesn't make any sense to do as such, and to simply say, I'm going to build a whole, and I'm going to release on every platform, it means you will not use the special features, in this case of the Xbox, you will not use the specific capabilities of that specific decision, so you can end up with a crappy product for the Xbox, and it will run crap on every other platform because it's not built for those platforms. So you will actually end up with a really bad product if you would do it that way, what you said. Unless, of course, you say up front that you're going to release for multiple platforms, in which case you have then that will be your focus, and that will be your sprint goals.
So what if you only have money for, you say, okay, ideally we're developing in parallel for both platforms. What if you only have money for one team?
That's pretty simple. You build an enormously awesome game for one platform. You cash in on that. You build a magnificent thing, and then you completely rebuild half your system again for a different platform. That's the only thing that works. And a lot of gaming companies actually tried to port PC games to platforms and vice versa, and it ended up with a complete mess.
So basically what you're doing now is exactly what I just recommended, which is reason out the scenarios of what will be economically the most, you know, the best solution to actually reach your goal of releasing it on one or both platforms.
No,
so thank you for that
goal would
illustration.
be make an awesome game on one platform. You're not going to need anything else. And once that platform is delivering money, is bringing in a lot of cash, then you can start refactoring and throwing stuff out and build for another platform. Unless your goal is, we've got a lot of money up front, and we're going to release it on multiple platforms at the beginning.
Okay, so if I was the architect that wanted to help the management decide on which of those two strategies to take, I would not just believe you on your word. I would ask you to reason that, to give the rationale for those arguments. And you're saying, okay, it will be very crappy if I do it that way. Okay, so based on what are you saying that, and then you get this, you know, this trade-off between the different scenarios, based on facts and economic arguments.
There's no trade-off in a crappy game.
Okay, so.
No, but more abstract.
So you sound.
The answer actually is you're not going to need it. You really ain't need it. If you budget for one platform, you make that decision, then build the best thing over there and don't throw in additional layers. And it actually proves in reality doesn't work.
So all I'm asking is that you, as an architect who is very convinced of this, that you cannot build a decent game if you use an abstraction layer, if you underpin that with economic arguments, so that I as a business manager can understand your reasoning, rather than just saying, okay, this guy looks like a real good techie, and he has a very convincing way of talking. So okay, he must be right. Which is actually what is going on in a lot of companies right now, and which causes a lot of bad decisions.
That's an interesting point, because this discussion can go on for hours. I don't know if you have an Xbox.
Then we have to wait
or
for
a
the game to
PlayStation.
actually be released, right?
Because Eltjo, you just talked about politics. If you just raise your voice enough, then you get a decision.
Yeah. So architecture is partly about politics. And actually there was another very good talk about it at that Saturn conference, the one that won the award for best talk. It was actually a Dutch guy talking about architects having to learn the language of the business stakeholder. And Len Bass was there. I don't know who of you knows. Okay, he's a like a guru of software architecture. He wrote the book on software architecture, literally. And he was sitting in that talk, and he said, this is the first time in years that I actually found myself learning something new from a talk. And this was this very nice talk. You can look it up on YouTube. Yeah, I think architecture is about context. So yes, the context of actually most software development projects is partly political. So we should understand that. Yeah.
So, Stephan and Pieter, because you said we need supportive management to get anything done. How can you combine this with a political argument?
It's a hard one.
Yeah, the downside is you can't change politics with Scrum. That's the hope. A lot of people hope that it solves everything, but it doesn't. The only thing what helps you in that is gathering facts, gathering knowledge, right? And that's why this iterative approach really helps, because as you go along, every 2 weeks or 4 weeks, you learn something, you actually can prove something that you've learned. That makes making decisions a lot easier. If you have a project that's running late, I can say, we probably need about 3 years, based on what? But if you release every 2 weeks, you finish stuff every 2 weeks, you create a message behind it, or like a sense of urgency, making it transparent. Okay, this is our current speed, and this is how much time we would need. Making the decision based on gut feeling, and then the scenario of the highest paid person in the room getting the way he wants it. That's ruling that out. That makes it a more neutral discussion. So that is how Agile, or at least Scrum in that sense, or the Agile principles, really help. But yeah, the politic thing, you cannot kill that with.
So how do you know you get the best solution?
You don't. You do afterwards. Yeah. So that's why you have to release as soon as possible, or at least finish stuff as soon as possible, so that you know if it works or not.
And I think really important is to get them involved. And so if a CEO or something says, well, I want that product, and give me a date, or give me something I can work with. And well, every Scrum team knows it's hard to say upfront what the finish date will be, or something like that. So get them involved, get them at that review session, show them what you've got, and make sure that if he comes and he gives his input, you take it along, and next session that is translated into the finished product again. So he sees, well, okay, if I give my input and I give my review and I give my comments, something is done with it and it has effect, and we are going in the right direction. And that's something we also learn at the training. If you have a traditional project, the team has an upfront design and maybe also architecture design, and they go in a sort of a diving boat underwater, and when the project is finished or reaching its end date, they have to submerge very fast because people want to show results. I think you all have seen in a movie a submarine coming out of the water very fast. It's a big splash and a big ripple coming along, and that's mostly the result. A lot of defects, because they're starting with, well, we have medium defects and high prio defects, and then they come really, really high defects, and then they come blocking issues and that sort of stuff coming along. And when you see, when you're in a Scrum way of working, or at least a iterative way of working, at first that customer says, well, do I have to come to the review for this? What do you have? It's a really small piece of functionality. What can I do with this? But if you take him along that process, he sees that his input is used, and you're also able to steer that architecture and refine it, instead of having the finished product at the end that you don't want. True?
Fast feedback, yeah. Get stuff out there, show results, deliver early.
Yeah.
You tend to agree too much. So did anybody in the audience have experience? Ah, look at that.
He has a question at least.
You just told us about how you handle situations where you have to convince the CEO, you draw him into the project, you try to explain why what you're doing is the good thing. You tell him what you can deliver in a week, perhaps in 2 weeks. But as soon as you do this, you're talking about a group that's part of your project. The CEO is involved, he is committed. He's also going to run into the same trap as the Agile team, trying to deliver whatever they're trying to deliver. And I think that's actually the situation where an architect outside of the team proves his word by saying it's very nice that we're all trying to run towards this deadline. Is anyone still trying to see if we're running in the right direction? He is trying not to be in the team that has to deliver, so that from a slightly more outside perspective, you can say this is actually running towards a dead end. Do you not see a role for architecture in that sense?
I think if you look at the example Stephan gave about the Spotify architect, that's about the function he is filling in, asking the right questions to the teams and challenging them. Are you going into the right direction? And what's
but that presumes that the team knows what the right direction is and is actually able to, outside of tunnel vision, see very clearly.
Well, they don't have to know, but if you challenge them, so they are, instead of thinking they know, a challenge to think about it and reconsider their initial thoughts, so to look outside of that tunnel instead of just that line. That's the challenge. But I think it's pretty tough. I don't know if other guys have experience with that.
It's not really my area of expertise. Most of the stuff I do is focusing on the software architecture and internal structure and quality things, but there's, something I think you guys said was that every team needs an architect, or every team needs somebody doing that technical lead role, which I completely agree with. But yeah, there's definitely room outside of the team for other architects across different disciplines, enterprise architects, people looking at strategic product development and all that sort of stuff. All of these things have to work in collaboration. And you have to look at all the trade-offs between all of these things as well. That's the hard thing.
You also see in some companies where they have multiple teams that, for instance, you have the Scrum of Scrums, where the Scrum Masters gather together, or the product owners, but also, for instance, the lead developers or some developers that gather together over teams to look at, okay, how are we connected to each other, where are the dependencies, where are the risks. So that's not quite the answer you're looking for, but they're still challenging each other on that point. So instead of having a separate person doing that, instead challenging each other on that part.
Right. Yeah, I recently heard that role called the reflective advocate.
Yeah.
So somebody who actually advocates, is present in a team, or from time to time walks in and basically asks them to reflect upon what they're doing.
If you find out, and to be clear, I'm not against the role of someone being an architect, but what I would challenge an architect to do is to, if you know the team is lacking knowledge, challenge them, like you're saying, share knowledge, teach them, and not decide on behalf of the team. And I think from my perspective, that's the key, and that's something not only for an architect, but for any person who has some specific kind of knowledge a lot of people need. Don't fly this person in, let them do their magic and let them fly away. Let them share the knowledge, transfer the knowledge.
I think there are exceptions to that. I mainly agree with you. I think decisions made by the team and together with the team are usually better than those made on behalf of the team. But there are situations where there are larger concerns that actually go above the scope of the team itself. And then sometimes the architect just has to decide for the team that they have to do something that they don't like at all. Just to be compliant with some other principle that actually the architect, because they are aware of the context, they're more outside directed, can actually be aware of.
I would say then that's that's something that the team is then lacking, that this awareness of the broader context they're operating in. So if that's lacking within a team, they should be taught as well, or at least be aware of that. Instead of, okay, well, you're not aware of the environment, let me take that decision. So on that point, I disagree.
I think in an ideal world, that would be lovely. In the real world, with budget and time constraints,
sure,
you have to make some decisions.
And skill.
Sure.
Yeah.
It takes time as well.
It does.
It doesn't happen like this.
I think many agile teams, of course, an agile team that works with all, Grady Butches and other, Simon Browns, and will be perfectly be able to do that and to take all that into account. But very often you have a development team where not everybody is a guru.
So, if you look at the time, there's one last question for each of you. If you would give one recommendation to the audience, what would it be?
Related to what?
Architecture.
Life.
Yeah.
Come visit Jersey, it's awesome.
Anything you can think of.
Why? Because you can go surfing. Go walking, go on the beach. Sorry.
You just killed the conversation.
You bought us time to think.
yeah. So, you three had time to think.
Oh, damn.
So my recommendation, and I think I already made it on the slide, is to learn to reason and to communicate in the language of your stakeholders. And if you live in a business kind of oriented world, then learn the business language and learn to reason in a business way.
Okay, thank you.
I would say, regarding architecture, if you're an architect, teach and ask questions.
Who do you ask questions?
Not make decisions.
Who do you ask questions?
Anyway. A development team or a team of software developers, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm next. Yeah, I think if you're looking at the architect, make sure you interact. Especially you see sometimes more like an enterprise architect living in an sort of an ivory tower, creating big schedules, not the ones Simon is teaching. And often they are scattered around the work floor, but nobody understands them, and so nobody lives them. So make sure they are, you make sure that people understand the why behind it. So they can create and make the right decisions.
So, this is a bit broad, but I would say go learn about software architecture. But the one aspect I think I want to specifically focus on is communication. I think a lot of the problems we have are related to communication because we just can't describe our software in an adequate way. And I think once we're much better able to describe our software, we'll start to build much more maintainable systems. And actually a lot of problems kind of go away. And we also need to go read that book that tells us how to deal with change and volatility and performance and scaling. So it's just a huge area that we need to focus lots more on.
Okay, thank you. So one more big round of applause for all the speakers.